It seems like time to begin. So I thought that it was a clever title, shining a light on solar panels. But that's not everybody sees that, I guess. The reason I decided to do this session is because I've been noticing through the transactions that the team is doing that there are more and more issues involving solar panels. And I wanted to discuss what those issues are, how they have a tendency to screw up escrows, impact your ability to get loans, impact your ability to get title insurance, and a whole bunch of other things. In fact, there have been so many solar panel related issues that we've changed the questionnaire that I asked team members to fill out if we're helping them write an offer, to start with a question or have it on that initial questionnaire. Are there solar panels on the property? Yes or no? I want to know. Right now, if they exist, if they're there, then the issues are who owns them, right? That's the big issue. Are they owned by the seller? I mean, did the seller pay for them? Is there a loan in order to finance the solar panels? Is there a lease in order to have the solar panels? And depending on whether or not the seller owns it, whether or not there's a lien or a lease, that all has an effect on loans and title insurance, the contract, and a whole bunch of other things. And so that's one of the things. In fact, it's gotten to the point that when I was showing property the last time and I would see houses with solar panels, we were like, oh, because there's just a lot involved. Now, the California Association of Realtors, and what I've done is pasted in a link, and I'm sure Ra will continue to paste in the link. I see Jody is here. Thank you, Jody, for showing up. Do you have a working camera?
I'm going to try that next.
Oh, okay, that's fine. The way things have been going, I thought I would just go ahead and get started. Of all my other, and Juan I see is here, so he might be able to. And there you go. Hi, Juan. So Jody is a loan officer with Golden One Credit Union and has felt the solar pain in closing loans. Juan, I kind of imagined that when he would be here that he'd be in a dark room or he wouldn't be able to see him with a muffled voice, because he works for a solar company, right? And so has the inside information. And I invited Melissa from Chicago Title, but I don't see her yet, but we're ready to go, if that's okay. Now, by the way, Juan and Jody, I'm going to just sort of go through the contractual part, right? And by the way, Jody, I have a handout which I've pasted in a couple of times, and I have the Fannie Mae. I decided to throw that in, the Fannie Mae guidelines for what do they do when you have a solar panel. Right, because it's an issue, right? And then if there's something you want to, just don't be bashful, right? Don't be just. All right, so that handout should look like this, something like that. So in the purchase agreement, there's a place where if you check it, that there's leased or liened items and solar panels, it will automatically, this is a form that you can automatically add. Technically, it is not a contractually required form, right? It is not required by the law in California, not required by the Department of Real Estate. Now, many of you may work for a broker that requires the form if there's solar panels. If there's solar panels, you want this form in the transaction. And by the way, you want to make sure that your loan agent knows right away that there are solar panels, that the title company knows that there are solar panels. Otherwise, we have these surprise, right before we're trying to close escrow and oh my gosh, they have solar panels. Now, you ought to read the advisory. And most of the issues that come up are mentioned here. One of the things is that people sometimes forget that they have them. Pretty much, right? Or that they owe money on them because it's all thrown into their property tax payments or something. And so they don't know, right? Depending on the kind of loan they have. Right. And so they're like, well, yeah, we own them, yeah, but no, you're making payments, right? You're making payments. So determining whether or not they actually own it and whether or not they're making payments or it's lease or it's lien is something that if you're a listing agent, you ought to do. Now, the standard purchase agreement says that you have so many days if you're the buyer to review leased and liened items if you have an investigation contingency. If you make an offer and you remove your inspection contingency and there are solar panels and they turn out to be leased, and for some reason, the buyer cannot assume the lease, and the solar panels have to be paid off, and that usually means every outstanding payment to the end of the lease. Isn't that right, Juan? Sometimes they have like a 10,000 buyout, sometimes they don't. They want every single payment, right? Something like that.
That's correct.
Right. So if the buyer has removed their inspection contingency prior to reviewing the leased or liened items, then basically they're buying it no matter what. And they might have to pay off the lien or the lease. They just may have to do it. So the first thing I would point out is that if you're the listing agent and there's a lease and a lien, you got to get that information and put it in the disclosure package so that the buyer can review it right away. A lot of times, Juan's going to find this hard to believe, but a lot of times buyers will Google search the name of the solar company and find some bad reviews. Isn't that crazy, right? They'll find, and then they'll say, well, I don't really like that company. I'd like to get solar panels from somebody else. Well, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Right, so the first thing is we want to make sure for the listing side that we get the information about the lease and the lien and we put it into the disclosure package. And if you represent a buyer, you might want to not remove your inspection contingency, or at least that part of it, until you're certain that your client can take over the solar panel. Now, by the one, maybe you can answer. I've heard that sometimes it's harder to qualify with the solar company than it is with Jody, right? That sometimes it's easier to get a loan to buy a house than it is to get a loan to buy a solar panel.
Yes, solar panels require most of the companies a 650 credit score.
Yeah.
So like you were mentioning, their lease, power purchase agreements, easy owns, that's a purchase without the homeowner paying money out of pocket. It's zero out of pocket. One thing I want to add is that all those three are transferable. So not every solar company puts liens on the home. They add something called CC1. I think we were talking about that last time with you, Michael. The companies just put a CC1 clause so they could claim ownership of the solar systems. When refinancing, they need to lift that so the homeowner could refinance their homes. I heard from many homeowners that when there's an issue about leases or power purchase agreements or any contract with solar, and the homeowner, the buyer wants to purchase the home, but they don't want to, they say I don't want the panels. I don't know why is that, but they do. So what they do, I heard they put it on the first loan. Maybe Jody could explain about that more. On the first loan, and they pay out the loan. for the either the lease PPA or the remaining of the ownership. So one thing I will touch is that when us agents selling a house with panels, find out who the company is. And these solar companies, they have consultants that they could go and explain the new homeowner with the solar panels and the benefits of it. Because the utility companies are raising rates, electricity raising about 7 to 10% per year. Leases, they have a 2.9 escalator. That means that they have like a $5, $6 increase every year. So it's power purchase agreements, except for ownership. They don't have any escalator. And they already claim 30% of federal ITC investment tax credit. So they already benefit from that. Sometimes I got customers that took about $20,000 in ITC tax credit. So I would approach to try to transfer these systems. It's a benefit for the new owners too. And if they can, then pay for it. Currently to appraisers from the city, each kilowatt, which is about 4 panels, they range around 3,000 to 4,000 per kilowatt. So if it's a 5 kilowatt system, they still have a value of, you know, 15,000, 20,000. So there's a value. Thank you.
Yeah, so for those that UCC1, which is mentioned, is also known as a financing statement. And it's what it is, you see, technically, if the solar panels are leased, then that means they belong to someone else other than the owner, right? Because the owner is leasing them, which in a technical sense means they're not real property, because real property is considered to be something that is, you know, owned and immovable. So you normally don't record personal property liens on real property, but this is an exception. And it gets recorded and can show up on a prelim as a recorded fixture, which is the UCC1. Did you have anything to add on this, Jody? We can't hear you. You are muted. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, I've got lots of little things to share just from on, you know, my side to help everyone understand what's so important about knowing about solar ahead of time and going ahead and tackling all the potential challenges that there are, because there's so many little moving parts, different types of ownership, different types of lender requirements, some things that have to happen if, you know, if it's a lease and you know, maybe the solar company is not, you know, depending on where if they've recorded something on title and then they're selling the house, well, maybe we have to resubordinate that UCC1, but if they're not willing to, then in some cases the solar panels have to be completely paid off. You've got some cases where a seller might have maybe a private loan for the solar panel, so it doesn't show up at all anywhere and nobody knows about it. The seller would have to say, oh, I have a private loan or a personal loan. I want it paid off through this transaction. Well, how do we do that? Because, you know, if it's considered personal property, not attached to the house, you know, so there's a lot of moving parts to it, and it could stall a transaction. And I have had, not the one we just had, Mike, but I had one a couple of years ago, and it was another month before we could close because it was really, I don't even think the owner even knew what they were doing. If they were leasing, owning, what, you know, you can buy just the power, you can lease the panels. There's all sorts of different things. So, I mean, I've got 2 pages worth of notes, but I think you guys are doing a pretty good job of covering it, even the stuff that matters to me. But I'm happy to answer any questions on the lending side. But my biggest thing would be, if you know there's solar there, get going on it right away. Don't leave that, as a recent listing agent said, well, you should have seen it on the appraisal report. Well, if you already know about it, let's go. Like, let's get this going. So we had a little bit of a delay there. So yeah, I would say lean heavily on listing agent to get that information over. And hopefully a listing agent, Juan, and you could speak to this, would, like you said, contact the solar company, try to get a consultant on the phone. What do we need to do? Here's what's going on, you know, all that kind of stuff, and just get it all handled ahead of time during the contingency period that you have, because that would be the time to figure out if there's going to be a problem or not wait for, you know, somebody else down the road, whether it's title or lender or somebody else, to say, oh, there's a problem, we're not closing tomorrow. Here's why. So yeah, good advice on that one.
The not all leases, power purchase agreements, or EC owns purchase have liens on it. That's why they do the CC1. So people don't want liens on their home. So except for the mortgage, right? You got no choice. You will have a lien on that. But for solar panels, there are leases and power purchase agreements and EC owns again that they don't have liens on it. So I would say that when solar panels, the best thing is to, you know, get the consultant from that company to talk to the new buyer, the new homeowner, so they can understand the benefit of it and make it easier. Because what they do is just the solar company will get their name, the new owner's name, and having qualified for the solar, even if their credit it's below 650 in some instances, all they have to do is pay $250 and that's it. It gets transferred and they get the benefits of savings.
I see. I've been told that Melissa has joined us from Chicago Title. Is that true, Melissa? I don't think you're an avatar or.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay. So if you, what are the issues as an escrow officer involving see what I'm telling agents to do? And first of all, let me just say this. If you're the buyer's agent, don't rely on the listing agent at first to do everything, because a lot of times they don't, right? I'm just saying, right? They don't do anything. And if you don't tell your lender, right, the lender you're working with, that there are solar panels, and you don't tell the escrow officer that there are solar panels, it's sort of bad when they both find out like 2 days before escrow is supposed to close. All right. And so what Melissa, do you see? And thank you for joining us today.
No, of course.
I
Actually was hoping, you know, it's always solar's always tricky for all of us.
Yeah.
So I was excited to see this topic. I've had solar issues where it didn't show on the prelim. So that's my only indication, is if I do see a UCC filed on the title report, then I know to at least ask the question. But I've had properties where we've already closed and there was solar, but it was owned outright. So then it didn't get transferred over correctly, because again, I don't have any way of knowing unless somebody tells me, unless it's on my title report.
So don't, as an agent, don't expect Jody and Melissa to look at the pictures of the appraisal to see if there's solar panels on the roof, right? Don't say something, you know, mention it. So we had a Royal Oaks, if you remember that listing of mine that we sold a little while ago. It has solar panels. The owner had passed away. The property was in a trust. I had listed the property working with the trustee. The owner said, well, I mean, he had paid off the solar panels a long, long time ago. But now the question was, prove it. Right? That was the question. Prove it that he paid off the solar panels. The solar company from which he purchased his solar panels no longer exists as a separate legal entity, but was merged with someone else, which means you have to connect with solar panel company number 2 to get to the data from solar panel company number 1 in order to get something in writing that says that in fact he's paid off the solar panel debt. Can you imagine that could take a little while? And I'll throw this out as a general question. So I was asked this by an agent recently. So has a couple own a house, they buy solar panels. They don't buy solar panels from Juan or somebody like that. They know a guy, they know a guy that knows a guy that's got solar panels. The husband is a contractor. So he figures, no big deal. I can put solar panels on a roof. How hard is that? So they install the solar panels. This is a cash transaction. No bill of sale, right? No paperwork, but they're solar panels. And the question they asked me, which I'm going to throw back to you, could this cause a problem when it comes time to sell the property?
I would think so. Who services the solar panels?
Well, I don't think they do.
I was going to say, because I mean, it's one thing to go and put them on your roof, but if, to my understanding, it's got to go through, PG&E and to collect the energy and all of that. So.
Well, we didn't get into that, but from the experience I had with that listing in Royal Oaks was that the lender for that buyer was insisting on seeing something in writing that said that they actually did own the solar panels.
Yeah.
The non-existence of the UCC1 wasn't enough to believe that they owned the solar panels. So I'm telling people it could be, if you pay cash for your solar panels, you might want to get something in writing at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, like Melissa brought up a good point there. Who's going to service the solar panels?
Yeah.
But if a friend of the homeowner is an electrician and he's just give me $12,000 cash, I'll do it, and then why the new owner will just acquire those panels without any benefits of guarantees and maintenance on these panels? They probably won't want it. They probably would say, no, remove those panels and I'll get the house.
Right.
Which it could do. It could happen. Like we will, if somebody wants to sign up and says, remove those panels and put the new ones, we will do that at no cost. So there are avenues where, you could always go and call a solar company and say, we want these panels to be removed. Now you're going to have a contract. So then you could have yourself.
Yeah.
So another thing that Melissa mentioned is there's an interconnection between the home solar panels and the utility company. So there's an interconnection, and that interconnection goes through the NEM, net energy meter, that the utility companies have to measure the amount of energy that the home is using and what the panels are producing. So they have that in a year. They do a reconciliation of the productions of the panels and also the usage of the house. If the house happens to have less panels, say 8 panels, but it needed 20, that homeowner will have basically a bill in 12 months of the remaining. That could be $2,000, $2,500, and that's important to know, and you can see it on the statements of the utility company. Also, the company, if the company is still in business, will be monitoring the system. So there's another point to find out and know about it. So that way you could guide your customers to a better purchase.
So Jody, you said you had like 2 pages.
But yeah.
Anything we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, actually, I think you briefly brushed over it, but I do want to bring this up because I get calls on it from time to time about the PACE or HERO program. And again, another reason to find all of this stuff out in the beginning of a transaction, because a PACE loan, if you will, can be a problem for a lender to accept because it is more considered a tax assessment. So whatever that costs, and Juan shaking his head, he knows, it's more, it becomes part of your tax bill. And that's how it's paid. So with it being like that, it means that Golden One, for example, or any lender would have a hard time perfecting our lien because there is no lien, right, on these, on this, because it's part of the tax assessment. So if there was a foreclosure, the tax, anything, you know, property tax behind or whatever, which there probably is if it's foreclosed on, that's going to get paid first before the lien, before the first lien. So lenders don't like that. You know, we want our first mortgage to be the first lien, we get paid first. So that's why we have a problem with federal tax bills that are owed, because federal tax liens take precedence over our lien. Same thing with property taxes and things like that. So if you've got something where it's a PACE loan, there are some exceptions. Golden One would be okay. For example, maybe we already have the loan, then they went and got the PACE, you know, stuff and had everything installed. We already have exposure. Maybe we would take that as an exception and be okay with it. Or maybe if there's very low loan to value, then we might be okay with it. It's all about risk to the lender, and the less skin a homeowner has in the game, the more risk there is to the lender, less likely that we would do something like that. So just keep that in mind. If you see that, you take a listing and it's a PACE issue, you know, you might want to rethink that, or ultimately it would just have to be paid off before closing.
And what that means, that you might be thinking, well, a lot of things get paid off when the property closes. So how is this different? What Jody is saying is that it's not going to be paid from the closing proceeds. It's going to have to be paid prior to the closing. That means somebody, buyer or seller, is going to have to pony up the money to pay off that lien before it closes. And if the seller is selling because they don't got any money and they don't have any money to pay off the lien, and the buyer is saying, I put everything I got into this, I'm getting in this house with a shoehorn, right? You know, I don't have any extra money. Well, we have a problem.
Yes, hero or PACE are used when a customer.
One of the things I've included for those of you that are studious, and we'll get to some of it, is the California Association of Realtors has a legal Q&A on PACE programs and solar leases. And we're seeing a lot, I'm seeing a lot more of this. Maybe Melissa can also, I mean, we're seeing a lot more. And I'm getting, not just am I seeing it involved, I'm seeing problems. So what I want to point out in this advisory is that there's also a questionnaire. And these are really the questions that you're going to want to have answered if you represent a buyer. And if you represent a seller and you have solar property, if you have solar panels, my suggestion is you get them to fill this out. Treat this like, it's like the SPQ. Even in terms of the way it's structured and laid out, this is the seller property questionnaire for solar. The solar property, it's still an SPQ, solar property questionnaire. But anyhow, so it asks them these questions like the age, who installed it, and sometimes they don't know. You know, does it have provide power? You can see the different questions. Are they owned? Is there still a balance? Is it leased? These questions ought to be answered, and it wouldn't hurt. Normally, we don't send the loan agent or escrow disclosures, right? In other words, they don't want to see the TDS and the SPQ. This is a little bit different, right? Because this isn't about, oh, there's something broken with the plumbing and it leaks every time. You know, this isn't that kind of a thing. This is simply questions about the nature of the solar panels and who owns them and that sort of thing. So if you don't have, if you want to just short circuit the process, right, you could share this with the lender and escrow. Don't send them the TDS, the SPQ, or any of that other stuff, right? They are allergic to it, right? But just send them. But this is safe, all right? The other thing, and this would be more for Jody, which I think this is the right beginning of it. Oh, it's not in, the pages are a little bit out of order. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. It's not what I wanted to do. All right, so I don't know why I feel like I have to do this, but I feel like I have to do this. So what I've included, although the pages are out of order, this is what happens when I'm doing stuff early or late, is and for those of you that, I'm using a program called Doc Hub, which allows me to change things. And what this is going to do is it's going to change probably the link to the document. Right. Let's see. And then, yeah, whatever. Okay. So your document should look like this. If you were to Google search Fannie Mae solar panels, you too would find it. But what this is are the, doesn't want to zoom in as much as I wanted to. But this is the, wow, working smoothly. But this is the guide. What's the easiest way to do this? So while I'm looking for it, you might want to, what is the all right, here it is. Hopefully this will work better. Let's see. Not perfect, but better. So I've been having so much fun with solar panels, I actually went and found that. So this is what Fannie Mae's guidelines are. This would be a Jody thing probably for what the lender wants. And it goes through if the solar panels are financed or collateralized. I don't know if there's a reason to talk about this, or what do you think?
I mean, it's a good point of reference for you guys to have. It's gonna, you could read this, you could ask me the same questions. Is, you know, lots of information. You know, there's a few different types of ways that you have solar, whether you're leasing the panels, or you're owning the panels, or you're leasing the power. And Juan is obviously going to be a good resource as well. Just ultimately keep this in the back of your mind that if there is a UCC filing and you find about, you see it on the prelim, you didn't know about it ahead of time or whatever, get us involved right away. Because like I said, the different types of ownership or, you know, leasing, if you will, could end up causing the transaction to fall through completely. And we want to make sure we head that off at the pass. It's just as important as me looking at someone's credit report to know if it's going to fall through or not. So don't get bogged down in the minutia of it. You know, Juan, Melissa, me, you know, we've been through this. We know kind of how it all works. Run questions by us. I'm sure Juan would be fine taking a call, Melissa too, me as well. So don't get too bogged down in it. But
yes.
But yeah, the selling guide is exactly where I go to pull the same information.
One of the things that's mentioned here, which is came up, I think, and I think it was with one of our transactions, that the solar lease wasn't calculated into the debt to income ratio. That the lender didn't know that there was a solar lease. And then when, oh, surprise, there's a solar lease, then that's a new expense.
And it depends also, you know, just because they're solar doesn't necessarily mean I have to include a payment in the ratios. For example, if they are leasing just the power, that's considered a utility. So I don't have to add that in, but that's a variable cost, right? Kind of like a power bill, but it's small typically. If they're leasing and there's a fixed lease payment, then I have to include that. But how am I going to know? We got to have all this documentation to know what type of ownership this is, to know whether I have to include a payment or not. And so that particular one was a lease and there was a fixed payment.
Right.
So we had to add that in.
And So there's a question about, could we explain what the UCC one is in better detail? I'm looking to see if I have a copy from one of my transactions, but who wants to? Anybody?
Melissa, it's a title thing, sort of, kind of. Do you want that one?
Thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
Again, to my understanding, depending on, of course, the situation, the UCC1 is a financing agreement that gets recorded against the property. When a client or customer gets solar on their property and they choose to get financing for their solar panels, then the solar company will record this financing. It's called a UCC1, a financing statement. Mike just put it on their computer to share. That's what it looks like. And again, it gets recorded against the property. So as I was saying earlier, if I get a preliminary title report and I see that this is recorded on the preliminary title report, that's an indication to me that, oh, this property has solar. I need to talk to my listing agent. But again, here's the caveat. If you buy it outright, depending on the solar company, they may or may not record anything like this. So I wouldn't know. But there's still different servicing agreements, and there could still be, you know, servicing payments for the solar that Jody would need to know, because that gets factored in to their payments and their monthly expenses. When I do see this, then I will contact the solar company. I will let them know that we're selling the property and that I need to obtain what's called a UCC termination. So that will record with the property and cancel out this UCC1 that's been recorded against the property.
Sometimes,
I was just going to say, if there's an issue with maybe the solar company doesn't want or is not willing to provide like a solar endorsement, if the UCC is not there to provide solar endorsement, you know, part of that is to protect, and remember, it's always to protect the lender, right? If we're giving someone a loan to buy this property, we got to protect the collateral, which is why we're able to give, well, part of why we can give the loan. But if they're not able or unwilling to sign a solar endorsement, basically to tell us, you know, who owns the panels? Okay, the solar company owns the panels. The homeowner is just leasing them. So what happens if the solar panels are destroyed or damaged or they need repair? Who's going to fix that? Well, you as the agent need to be able to give your client the assurance that either they're going to fix it or the solar company is going to fix it. Well, how do you hold the solar company, you know, liable to do that if there's damages? If you have no paperwork, no documentation, no agreements, no nothing filed, it's one of those SOL moments, right? The homeowner's going to end up doing it. Nobody's going to do it because it's the right thing to do. So it's another reason it's important to have all of this stuff figured out ahead of time and to make sure we have the proper documentation to protect not only the lender, but also for you and your client.
All right. I could say a little bit about this UCC1 financing statement. Basically, it's not considered a lien. So it's an interest that the solar company has over the property. So because solar companies learned that homeowners do not want to have liens because of panels installations on their home. So they come out with the UCC1 financial statement. So that means the solar company has interest over these solar panels because they're not paid complete. Leases in 20 to 25 years, so it's purchase agreements and easy owns. So that doesn't mean that they own it at the end. They still have to close it with the solar company or the financing company and pay about $300, $400 to have it, you know, it in, or they will continue for 5 consecutive years, each year, 1 to 5 years. with the lease. So they need to cancel that out too. And oddly enough, sometimes when I'm door knocking and somebody already have solar panels and I ask them, which company did you go with? Which company was it? They don't even know. So it goes back again that as an agent, you can help your customers find out who the company is. If not, you just go back to the where the electric panel is. There's a box, and in that box that the solar company put, it should be the number there. I'll help them find out about. Once you get that number, you call them, and they could email the contract. And in that contract, you could see, like Melissa was saying, in Jody, about the warranties and guarantees of these solar panels.
So there's a question, what if the UCC one is not in the preliminary title report? I've had those where the prelim was clean, but we still ended up having to get a UCC one because it was discovered that there are solar panels. The UCC one is basically a statement from a creditor, potential creditor, that there's no debt left, something like that, right? It's a way of showing that it's been released. But if it's not on the preliminary title report, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it isn't going to be an issue. So let me ask you, the buyer wants to assume the existing lease. The lender might want to know that they're assuming the lease. The solar company says, well, you can't assume the lease until you own the house. Is that right? But I can't own the house unless I assume the lease of the solar panels. So how is that worked out in terms of the timing of it?
Well, I don't know. In my experience in the transactions that I've had, again, different solar companies have different procedures. But we have had where there's an assumption, you have to start right away. So again, as soon as you get into contract, again, depending on the solar company, whether the seller initiates it or escrow initiates it, they let the solar company know. The solar company will get a hold of everybody. They'll draft up a new agreement and arrangement. And it actually is a pretty smooth process from what I've seen. They'll put together the agreement, everything gets docu-signed, and then, of course, once the transaction is complete, that'll consummate the agreement and it'll be rolled over to the new buyers. But the lender will need to see the signed agreement. So that's why I say start as early as possible, because it does hinder the lender's progress.
Any other questions? I mean, that was mine.
I have a question. Is the transaction going to close if they don't do the transfer? Is that going to stop the lender from approving the loan to go through?
If they don't do the transfer, meaning if they don't do the transfer of the lease, or which transfer are you talking about?
I'm talking about the solar panels not being transferred on time, and will that hold up the completion of the escrow, for example?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That's why, again, why I think we keep saying, just let's get on it at the very beginning. Don't leave it for, don't wait for someone to maybe see it somewhere. If you already know they're there, it's, we got to get on top of it. And you guys that are listing agents, I just can't stress it enough. Make sure when you take that listing, you go ahead and find out if there are going to be any potential challenges with the solar, because what ends up happening is lenders and title gets blamed for all of that stuff that goes south, you know, and I can only take so much of getting blamed for of everything, you know. So, you know, we're all in this together. We all want the same outcome, right? We all want to be able to close the loan. It's not like you've got a lender or title sitting there saying, we're just going to try to be difficult today. You know, it's not like that. We all want the same thing. So we're a team, right? So just get on top of it right away.
Any other questions? All right.
I do want to say one more, just
Wait, you got,
randomly thinking about it. You know, you could try to spin the, you know, property having solar, depending on how it's being transferred, you know, leased on, whatever. You could spin it as a, you know, selling feature, because it is a benefit to have solar. You know, there's a lot of, you know, painful parts to the very beginning of it, but Juan can speak to all of the benefits of it, and even the hassle that a new homeowner wouldn't have to go through trying to shop around and find solar, you know, and all of that. So you could use it. If you're a listing agent, you could say, hey, we can market this to your advantage, you know.
yes, you should learn to sell the property. Any other questions? Oh, new constructions, we have a question. Is there anything special to look out for in regard to solar on new construction? A lot of new construction already has solar on it. It usually, it's part of the package. You're signing up for, you know, the system at the same time. Is there anything else, Juan, that you have?
Yeah, some of the, depending on the district in California and other states, new homes are required to actually put solar panels. So that, I think it should be included in the contract when, you know, the company who built these homes, to add into the total package there. I noticed that some new homes, they don't require, so that's when we go out, and then that's gonna be, again, with the CC1 financing statement, the solar company will claim interest in the solar system. So I think the more everyone find out about solar and the benefits, it could be a good thing for us agents to sell homes with solar, and know a little bit about the benefits in terms of cash, money, and also it's renewable energy, so it's clean energy. That homes, it's sending less CO2 to the atmosphere. So that's another pitch. You could say, well, this home had solar panels. It's a good thing for the environment and your pocket.
And for those of you that are really wanting to get into it, the National Association of Realtors, California Association of Realtors has a green designation where you can become, you know, get a little thing you can put in your email signature that says you've been certified for selling greenhouses. And there's some evidence that the houses that are, and green is not just solar panels, but houses that have been configured that way do sell for more than the ones that have not. Right? Rachel agrees. So, all right, any other questions? Have we spotlighted enough of this? I believe if I don't have Brian, so if you're interested, Juan's information is in the chat, Jody's. Melissa, if you wanted to type in yours or Brandon's or somebody else that you would rather they wanted to, or not, you know, this would be the time to do it. So make sure that you've got the solar advisory and questionnaire in the contract, that you've read it, you've communicated with escrow, you've communicated with the lender, the listing agent. The seller usually has to begin the transfer process, right? The buyer really can't do that. because they're not on any of the documents, and all that needs to be started right away. That's my recap. All right. Cool. Well, that's it. I'm gonna go, for a swim, in the beach, on the beach. That's what Morgan Hill looks like. All right. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for participating. Thanks, Melissa and Jody and Juan.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
It's been fun. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Stay
Thanks,
out of the sun. Bye.